Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Royals Rundown podcast presented by Royals Review. I am Jake Milham, shouting into my microphone here, joined by Jeremy Greco on the other end of my screen. Jeremy, can you hear me through the microphone and the string that's attaching us?
Just so loudly, actually. I can hear you
Oh,
very well. I was,
good.
just listening, and then you're, shouting, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it is a little loud."
Yes, Honey is in the background, letting me know that they can hear me across the street. I'm sure they can. So maybe I'll tone it down a little bit.
Can you? Can you tone it down right now? I mean, things are
I
heating up, finally.
I know, right? I'm just so jazzed up. I'm really excited. I didn't even get to go to Royals rally this weekend.
Me neither. Something about me.
Honey is saying that she has noise canceling headphones on and she can still hear me.
Yeah,
So
that checks out.
apparently we need to replace those headphones because they obviously suck.
Sounds like it.
But we can review things like that later on in this podcast during Royals Review reviews. Speaking of Royals Review, they are the people who make this podcast happen. Make sure you go check out royalsreview.com. You could have read Jeremy's inspiring roster prediction so far. You know, he is just semper Gumby, Jeremy. Okay, you really turned it around after the
Semper
Carlos
Gumby.
Estévez. Yes, it's a military saying.
What does that mean?
It means you're just really flexible.
Seize the Gumby? Be flexible?
Yes,
Isn't Semper
seize the
Fi
Gumby.
seize the day or something? What is
No,
always
that's
no, it's
carpe
always.
diem.
Oh, carpe diem. Oh, Semper Fi is always faithful.
Yes.
Always Gumby. I'm never Gumby. Gumby is freaky, okay? No Gumby here.
No, it is. You could have read Jeremy's wonderful prediction already by the time you're listening to this podcast. So make sure you go check that out after you're done listening to us here. Also, gonna plug something else. I had the privilege of hosting a panel yesterday on the Pitcher List PitchCon stream.
Why didn't I know you were doing this?
Because I kept it close to the chest, Jeremy.
Yeah, but that means I didn't get to watch it or listen to it or whatever the heck I was supposed to do with it. The way I was supposed to engage with it because I didn't know it was happening.
Well, you know what? The thing that was supposed to happen happened. So PitchCon is something that PitcherList does every year, trying to raise funds for ALS support and research and things like that. They had a $10,000 goal. It's ending today, and by the time I was streaming Saturday evening, they had already exceeded that $10,000 goal. So thank you to everyone who might be listening to this and help support that, or just with your
I'm gonna
views or with your dollars.
I'm gonna have to collaborate with your wife until you start telling me when you're doing things.
I'll share my calendar with you.
All right.
My
I want to support my podcast co-host.
I know, I'm just terrible about communication. You know that, Jeremy.
Yes, the podcast co-host, bad at communication.
Extremely so. And that's just me. But apparently the Kansas City Royals were really good at communicating with Carlos Estevez's
Estévez?
Estévez. I was hold on, we're cutting that. That was bad. Estevez's it was what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Apparently the Royals were really good at communicating with Carlos Estévez's representation because the Royals signed the right-handed pitcher to a 2-year deal with a club option for a 3rd year. Jeremy, they introduced him at Royals Rally. It was great to kick off those festivities with I would say a solid Royals addition to the roster. Like, this wasn't a fringe spring training competition guy. This is a guy who's going to come in, compete for that closer role. What were you thinking when you saw the news break?
I mean, I was pretty stoked. You know, I had mentioned, I think a couple weeks ago on the podcast, that there were a lot of good relievers left out there, and the Royals should probably snag one of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then names started coming off the board. Tanner Scott, Tommy Canley, Kirby Yates, and on and
Yeah.
on. Jose Leclerc, I think, came off the board. On and on and on. And I'm like, I'm going to run out of relievers if the Royals don't jump on that train. And then they went out and got Carlos Estévez. So I think out of all of them, my favorite, like the most fun target to me would have been Kenley Jansen,
Yeah,
who's
it would
still
have been
out
fun.
there. But Carlos Estévez I mean, he's better than I thought they were going to get. I figured it would be somebody on the cheaper end, like a Kirby Yates or a Tommy Canely. And so when those guys were coming off the board, I'm like, well, there goes that. And then Estevez shows up. So I'm pretty happy with the signing as far as I'll say in a vacuum, because we'll talk about the context of the signing, but in a vacuum of do I like Carlos Estevez on this team? Yes.
Yeah, I think this significantly raises the floor of this team and bumps up the ceiling even. You know,
The
this is if you go back to the 2024 opening day roster and you look at the three high leverage guys that the Royals could have trotting out of the bullpen, it was Will Smith, James McArthur, and Chris Stratton. And now heading into 2025, it looks like Lucas Urseg, Hunter Harvey, and Carlos Estevez. Like that's a pretty good
yeah,
turnaround, and it's very go ahead.
someone pointed out in my article over the weekend that everyone talks about how great this bullpen is, but it's still got Chris Stratton in it. I'm like, yeah, but the difference is Chris Stratton isn't the eighth inning guy. He's now
Mhm.
the mop up guy, and potentially gonna get cut. Potentially the last one on the roster. Like there's a huge difference in Chris Stratton's position on the roster heading into 2024 and the position he held throughout the season and the position he will enter this season with.
Exactly. That is, I mean, that just hits it right on the head. Estevez, I mean, it's I still think that Urseg is the de facto closer at this point,
Mm,
but I mean, Estevez has a lot of experience in that role. He had 20 saves for the Los Angeles Angels before they traded him to the Philadelphia Phillies, and he had very similar success, like shifting ballparks, shifting teams, not really that big of a deal to him. Unfortunately, the last that we really saw of him last season was giving up a grand slam to the New York Mets that ended the Phillies season. So that was kind of left a sour taste in some fans' mouths. But I don't know. This is a good addition, and less than what? Yeah, we're 10 days out from pitchers and catchers reporting. It's good to see him wearing a Royals uniform when doing
yeah.
so.
I, contrary to you, do believe he will be the primary closer. I think Urseg will get some closing opportunities, but even once the Royals traded for Urseg last offseason, he was not the closer until the playoffs. He was the fireman. And I think that Q likes having a fireman in his bullpen, and I can think of no one better suited for that than Lucas Urseg. Ice water in his veins because he's booze free, so that's all he's got is that ice water. You're like, you're not laughing. I'm like, maybe that joke didn't work. I'll try again some other time.
Yeah,
Anyway, so
took
yeah,
me a
I think
minute.
he's the fireman, and he'll get some save opportunities. Certainly, like there's no reason now during the regular season for Estevez to go 3 games in a row because you should have Urseg to close that third game, and so that gives you some flexibility with you're not burning guys out, but you are securing wins.
Yes.
Um, I don't know if you remember there was the game against the Guardians. It was the final game of that 4 game series on that right before.
Where they blew that where they
Yeah, where
blew
they
that
blew it because
lead.
Michael Walker
Yeah.
was pitching later than he should have because they didn't have any relievers left. And I think that this move will help with that kind of problem where guys shouldn't get overused in that way, and we should be able to close out games now. I think the pitching staff now is an undeniable all over, not just the starting rotation, but the starting rotation and the bullpen are now undeniable strengths of this team.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to deny that. Like I thought about it and I was curious like, well, is it still a strength? But when you go and you look at their projected bullpen from Fangraphs, it goes to Estevez, Urseg, Hunter Harvey, John Schreiber, Angel Zerpa, Sam Long, and Chris Stratton. Like that's a great group. That is really, really good. And I like that. It is, and this is at a fair deal. I'm not saying the
Yeah.
Royals didn't have to overpay for him. This is a guy who's an all-star in 2023, had an all-star worthy
Yeah,
resume
his
in
best season was
2024.
last year.
Right, exactly. So, and what he's going to be 32 in 2025, and he's 33 the following season. Like, this isn't a guy on the decline that his value is peaking and that he's going to sharply downturn, i.e., a Chris Stratton. This is a guy who you can see come in and contribute significantly immediately.
And with that club option, in the same way that the player options make things dangerous for the team, the club option makes things safe for the team. Because if he's really good this year and next year, they get to keep him. for that 3rd year for 2027. And if he's awful, well, that was a club option. Thank you for your service. Good luck with your next contract.
Exactly. So how this breaks down is he's going to get paid $10.1 million over the next 2 seasons, or excuse me, in each of the next 2 seasons, and then that club option is worth 13 million or a $2 million buyout if the Royals decline to pick up that option. So even then, it's not a bank breaker. You
I mean,
jump
some
up,
relievers are getting 20, 25 a year right
yeah,
now.
yeah, like that Tanner Scott deal was huge.
Josh Hader
That
got a
that
ton of
Josh
money.
Hader deal, yeah, he did. So that is, and all in all, like, is that a great way for teams to spend their money? I don't know.
Didn't work
But
out
that's
for
not
the
what
Astros.
it did. It did not. So, but we're not here
Now,
let's
Jacob, you were less bullish on this signing when you were writing about it earlier this week.
yeah. So
Has your
let me.
opinion changed, or are you just trying to play nice? Because don't play nice. We got to talk this out, buddy.
I'm trying to play nice. I am, because I do think that I can believe that Estévez helps this team immediately, and I feel more comfortable about the bullpen heading into 2024. I just don't think that he's going to give you the performance that someone slightly cheaper can give you in Kauffman Stadium.
Such
And
a
well, and listen, that's the thing. I don't have a reliever
yeah.
right off the get, but he gives up a ton of quality contact.
Hmm.
He really does. It's, most of the time it's line drives, it's fly balls, things like that. And we saw how, say, like a Brady Singer, right? He didn't have great strikeout rates, but he induced a ton of ground balls and he relied on that infield defense behind him. And I thought that that could be a formula for success for the Royals to cheaply add another bullpen arm that could come in and still have resources to allocate to other players, i.e., an outfielder, which we'll talk about that later. Estévez doesn't have a problem giving up home runs in home run friendly parks. The Angels and the Phillies home run parks are some of the more hitter friendly parks out there. And he didn't give up home runs there. I just think that in Kauffman Stadium, batters are going to put the ball in play against him a lot. And at that point, you're not relying on the infielders, you're relying on those corner outfielders and the center fielder to go get it. And when you have two negative defensive guys in MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe being the primary outfielders, I'm not going to trust them to make that play every single time. We saw
What if it's
plenty.
Jonathan India and MJ Melendez? Does that make you feel better?
Not really.
Yeah.
No.
So here's my thing is, yeah, he does give up quality contact fly balls. Like you said, he doesn't give up home runs, but you know what else
Right.
he doesn't give up? Walks.
True. He
He
was
did
great
not
at that last
hardly
year.
walk anyone last year, and he struck out plenty of guys. So you strike out 2 guys, you give up a double, you strike out 1 more, that's 0 runs. That double didn't hurt you. If he's not walking people and he is striking people out, I'm not as concerned about the other stuff. Now, if the walks start to come back, or because he's walked more guys in the past than the last couple of years, but some of that was, he pitched in Colorado
He
before
did.
2023. And his stuff didn't play as well there as
No.
it doesn't for any pitcher. And then, so I think there's a lot to work with there. And I think the Royals came last year with well, let's get guys who don't give up hard contact, but also don't strike guys out, and we'll see how that works. And it didn't. So let's go the other direction. That makes sense to me. And the other thing that I like is that when David Lesky was reviewing him in his newsletter, he's a 2-pitch pitcher primarily. He does
Yes.
throw a changeup to lefties, but he mostly throws fastball slider.
Yep.
Slider. Where have I heard about sliders before? Now, his slider,
Yeah.
it gets a really good stuff grade, but also he doesn't get as many whiffs on it as you would think. So there might be some improvements that could be made there by Brian Sweeney, Zach Bove, and the rest of the guys, and turn him into somebody a little bit more elite, somebody a little bit, maybe he stops giving up the hard contact. When he does give up, he gets more whiffs and gives up weak contact when he gives up contact. I think that's a possibility. When the Royals have made pitching acquisitions in the last few years, with a couple outliers, I guess, in Will Smith and Chris Stratton, guys have generally gotten better. when they came to Kansas City. So I think that that's something we can look forward to with with Estévez as well. So I'm excited to see how he might improve this year.
Yeah, and there's wonder how much that has to do with his tunneling. Primarily his fastball plays higher up in the zone,
Yeah,
and that slider. Just I haven't gone back and watched every single one of his games last year, but what I did see is I saw a lot of that slider ending up higher in the zone against righties, and some of those batters they recognize that pretty quickly and they turn on that.
yeah,
But again, maybe that's what's leading to the hard contact, but not, putting it over the fence, which, and at the end of the day, a hard hit ball, as long as it's an out, it's still an out.
yeah.
I,
And even hard hit balls are going to be outs quite frequently because of the way baseball is.
true, that it is. I'm looking at his Fangraphs projections, and I know he's exceeded them the past 2 years, so take these with a grain of salt, but your Fangraphs, let's see here. They don't have zips listed, so I'm just going to go with the steamer projections. Let's say 4.13 ERA with a 4.08 FIP. Both would be his worst since 2021. Um, Worth a point 0.3 FWAR, striking out about 9 guys over 9 innings, walking about 3.2.
So that would be
It's
a huge jump in walk rate and a huge jump in ERA from what he provided last year. And you got to remember that these projection systems go back generally at least 3 years. So one of those years is counting Colorado still.
it is right.
So I'm not going to read too much into those projections. I
Fair
think
enough.
generally projections are useful and they tell you something, but in this case, I think that the old data is lying to us maybe a little bit.
Okay. So just food for thought. That's where I stand on him. And that's probably what is fueling my desire for him to not be the default closer right now. But we have to wait until opening day to see what actually happens
Here's my problem, Jacob.
with my line of thinking.
No, not with your line of thinking. My problem with Estévez,
Mm,
because it's not all sunshine and roses. Even for me, I'm excited for him. Like I said, without context. So let's get in
yeah.
a little bit of context.
Yeah.
Of he is a very good reliever. He improves the bullpen, improves the team. He's going to be worth, probably. I think the best I would reasonably hope for is 1 WAR, 1.5. I mean, if he gets 2, what a signing, man! What a
Oof.
signing, 2
Yeah.
WAR. But the Royals could have gotten more
Yeah.
for
I could have.
similar amount of money. And if you saw, I'm pivoting us a little bit here.
Yeah.
To the
Go ahead.
Athletic article Ken Rosenthal wrote. They also talked about this a little bit on Kaufman Corner this week. Soren Petro and David Lesky. And so the Royals did make an offer for Anthony Santander, didn't quite get it across the finish line. Would have been an interesting thing to see. Apparently, that their last offer didn't get to him until after he'd already committed to Toronto. It would have been worth more money per year, but less money total because they were offering him 3 years. And then they also did make an offer to Jurickson Profar, but they only wanted to go to 2 years for him because they were afraid he would be a designated hitter by the end of that contract, which is probably a reasonable fear. Either of those guys adds at least 2 WAR, I think, to this team, and probably more, especially when you consider that they're replacing a negative WAR in a corner outfielder, whereas Estévez is probably replacing a replacement level player in the bullpen. And really, he's replacing, he's replacing Angel Zerpa. And Angel Zerpa gets fewer innings, and then the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy, and it ends up being, an upgrade, but not the huge upgrade that replacing an entire starting left fielder would have offered.
Exactly.
And those guys ended up getting just a little bit more than Estévez is. He's getting about 11 million per year if he gets all 3 years of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then Profar got, I believe, 15, and
Yes, I think so.
Santander got 20 per year, but a lot of it was deferred. So that makes it less than 20 in terms of true cost, because of inflation and such. So it's frustrating to me, and a lot of I think what I saw from a lot of people is a response of, "Well, that was smart. The Royals should have outbid those deals." Profar is probably going to be a designated hitter in 3 years. What are you going to do if you've got Jack Caglione and Vinny Pasquantino and Salvador Perez still around? And I say, figure that out in 3 years. What if you don't have those guys around? What if Salvi decides he's done and he retires? What
Yeah.
if Caglione turns out to be an excellent outfielder? Worry about whether Profar is a designated hitter in 3 years. In 3 years,
Yeah. Like,
if you think he can still hit in 3 years, and you think he can still hit now, then sign him. And so that leads me to my final thing, which is that it was kind of the way this has been written up by Andy Rogers kind of implied that the Royals didn't get the outfielder they wanted. This might have been how Rosenthal put it. Might have been how both of them put it. The Royals didn't get the outfielder they were trying to get in Santander or Profar, but so they pivoted to pick up a reliever instead.
yeah.
Um,
That's how both of them framed it.
yeah, that's how it seems framed to me. So that sounds pretty disappointing, I think, as a Royals fan. But I have to throw this out there. When we interviewed Annie Rogers, she kind of said, yeah, this might just be it. They might not sign anybody else. And it turns out they were making significant offers to Jurickson Profar, Anthony Santander, and Carlos Estévez. So I'm not going to throw in the towel yet.
Not yet.
I think that the Royals have done a very good job of under promising and over delivering. That's what we've talked about before. So I think they've done an excellent job of that the last 2 seasons. And I was getting frustrated last week. We were recording the podcast right before that news broke.
Yep.
I was getting frustrated, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm not frustrated, but also like patience. We got to have a little bit of patience. The season hasn't started yet. Things can still change, and it's important to, and we've seen this time and time again, even when a couple of years ago we bashed the Royals on our podcast for not selling enough at the deadline, and it turns out, oh, they did. It just, we didn't find out about it till after the deadline had passed.
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
remember
yeah.
that.
So we got to all take a breath. Let's give it a minute. If we're halfway through spring training and they still haven't made a move, that's when I'll start to get concerned again, I think. Though even last year, they traded for John Schreiber pretty close to the end of spring training. And as
Yeah,
long
they
as
did.
these guys are in spring training, as I think when we were talking about Andy Rogers, I think it was we were talking to, might have been Meg Riley. We've interviewed so many people the last
I
2 weeks.
know. Crazy.
Um, that as long as they're in spring training, like they're getting baseball ready. So it's not the same thing as when Jordan Montgomery signed at the end of spring training and he wasn't in anybody's spring training. So I think there still could be good news coming for us.
Yeah, I hope there is. And it's we've spoken on this podcast several times before about general manager and owner speak. They're always going to have a certain tone of optimism, and that was abundant this weekend at Royals Rally. But it kind of worked on me. It was using words like concerted, direct, disappointed, talking about these efforts that the team has had to acquire impact players ahead of 2025. And he's right. You can't force a trade through. You have to have a proper dance partner to make a trade happen. And I'm sure that once rosters start to settle themselves out, maybe there's a few guys that fall in other organizations that would be a boost in Kansas City. And that is when I would hope the transactional Kansas City Royals, who already dropped Braden Shoemake.
How will you remember the Braden Shoemake era, Jacob?
I will remember how much I bashed that man for not taking a single plate appearance with the Kansas City
Did
Royals.
I just want to confirm, I did tell you that I didn't think he'd be on the 40-man roster by the time spring training started, really.
Yep. You told me. I was worried. I was like, is this the left-handed utility option? Adam Frazier, is that you?
Well, that's Kevin Biggio.
Oh yes, the super utility player, Kevin Biggio. No, but there is a lot of time left still, and I don't know that the news about them missing out on Santander is at least promising, and that they do want to invest in the payroll a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it was what, 3 years, 66 million was the last deal they offered him. They didn't just go out there and be like, "Well, we made a 1-year, 10 million deal and he didn't take it. Can you believe that? We tried." No, they made a real effort.
Yes, they
So
did.
that they obviously acknowledge that there is a problem in the outfield. Like I said, I get the concern. I feel the concern with the implication that the Royals said, "Okay, well, we can't have an outfielder. I guess we'll get a reliever," as if those things are remotely comparable. But I also think that we've kind of been told, we've been told things before now that weren't necessarily accurate, implied things that weren't necessarily accurate about how hard the Royals were going to try to do things. So I think we just got to wait it out, man. It's
We do.
hard. It's so
It
hard,
is.
especially this week. This week, the only week of the entire year where a combo Kansas City Royals, Kansas City Chiefs fan doesn't have anything to look forward to.
Nothing on the calendar. I was watching the Savannah Bananas this morning. I mean, it is
My dad
we.
just keeps watching Chiefs playoff replays on NFL Network.
You know what? I can't blame the guy. I really can't. It is. I don't know. I feel better about the team overall right now,
Sure.
and I will. Maybe I should be eating some crow right now because I was pretty despondent, I would say, about the ownership being willing to invest
For sure.
in the team, and apparently they're willing. They just don't have anywhere to spend that money right now.
Well,
Um, Maybe
there's
Alex Bregman can
if
help.
they've got if they Alex Bregman's not coming. If
No,
he's
he's
got
not.
a 5 or 6 year deal
Yeah.
offer out there from somebody, the Royals aren't going to do that. And as much as you know me, I'm all they can afford it. They should do it if it improves the team. But I can't blame them for not wanting 5 or 6 years of Alex Bregman. Like that goes beyond like improve the roster. Like if you sign Profar for 3 years and he's only good for two, well, okay, one bad year, and you got 2 good years, and you've got these guys coming up in 2 years. You should have Caglione, Blake Mitchell, Carter Jensen, whoever ready to go.
Hmm.
Like you should have the reinforcements you need to fill in at the missing spots in the lineup. But
Kyle Isbell will still be batting ninth.
Bregman fell off last year, and then you try and give him 5 more years, and you're like, is he going to be good any of those years?
Hey, that's fair. That's fair.
Now, if the Royals signed him, I would start looking for, all the reasons why he'll be good for the whole time, and I'm so excited. But I also like with them not having signed him, I'm not gonna bash them for not signing him.
Yeah, and you know what? Power to the Detroit Tigers, who are still one of the teams in the Alex Bregman lottery right now.
When I think of the Alex Tigers, the
The
Detroit
Detroit
Tigers,
Bregmans.
the Detroit Bregmans, I think of the Detroit Tigers and I think of expensive infielders.
Yes,
I think of
Javier Baez.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I more power to them. Exactly. Yes.
exactly. And as much as we all loved Miguel Cabrera, that contract at the end of it, oof,
Well,
that was
again with
rough.
Miguel Cabrera, he was so good for so long that I don't care how bad he was. Right at the end for
Yeah.
the last couple of years, I can't care. If I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, I'm like, you got MVP stuff from this guy. He was worth every penny you paid him.
All right,
Now, Albert
fair enough.
Pujols with the Angels, that didn't work.
No, that did not. That did not. And you know what? It's right now the Royals are second in projected payroll in the AL Central. Like it's still not a lot in the overall MLB picture, but it's still in their immediate peers.
I
It's still a good spot.
I have to give them, at least a little credit. If I'm gonna bash them as hard as I do when they don't spend, I have to give them a little credit because I've been pretty vocal about in the money making environment that is MLB right now. Lots of money being made, lots of value being accrued. You should be able to spend more on your roster. Well, the Royals are not embarrassing themselves. They're not the Cleveland Guardians, they're not the Chicago White Sox, they're not the Minnesota Twins, they're not the Pittsburgh Pirates, they're not the Sacramento Athletics. They're making a sincere effort. Could they
Yes.
make more of an effort? Yes, and I still believe that they will. It might be via a trade, as I kind of indicated in my article. I don't know if you want to talk about that trade proposal I made at all, Um,
Yeah, I do actually.
yeah, so
FYI.
but I even if you make that trade that I suggested, the Royals would be adding a little bit of payroll doing that. So I do think there's a move to be made still. I just can't believe that the Royals are gonna go into the season with Michael Garcia, MJ Melendez, and Hunter Renfroe as the de facto starters.
Yeah. So tell our listeners about that trade you proposed in your
So
article.
before the Estévez signing, I was writing up this preseason preview prediction. How many more pre's can I put in here?
A lot of pre's apparently.
Premature.
Pre-podcast.
And I was like, man, they had a lot of relievers. Like, not they have Urseg is the only one that you're like, yeah, definitely elite, but they have a bunch of guys that are like, he's probably good. And to the point that like James MacArthur, a guy I love, starting the year in the minor leagues. And then they added Estévez. And then I remembered Hunter Harvey's been part of trade speculation. Anel Zerpa, Carlos Hernandez. Royals are probably going to have to trade out of the bullpen
Someone.
now. I think that when they traded a starter to get that bat, the first bat, so trade relievers to get the second one, since the relief core is now your position of strength and a lot of guys. And then they've got so many other guys that need chances at some point this year. Noah Cameron, Eric Sarantola, Sisk, Steven Cruz. And again, James MacArthur, not probably going to start the year on the 26-man roster the way things are looking right now. He's probably going to need another shot. So the trade that immediately popped into my head was Angel Zerpa, Hunter Harvey, and Carter Jensen for Taylor Ward. And I know that sounds a little
Pretty
heavy.
aggressive.
But first of all, the Angels are said to be asking for a lot. So you're probably going to have to give up something you don't want to give up if you want Taylor Ward. And I think Taylor Ward is probably the best target for the Royals for a lot of reasons that we've gone over many times now.
Mm-hmm.
But also, when I plugged it into Baseball Trade Value Simulator, came up even.
Okay, that's
Came up
surprising.
with like the Royals were like $1 million shy of the excess value.
Gotcha.
So somebody suggested in the comments swapping out Carter Jensen for the other catching Ramon Ramirez, I think.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
catching
Ramon
prospect.
Ramirez.
Correct me if I'm wrong, he's in the complex league?
He should be starting in low A this year.
Yeah. I don't think you can swap out a triple A catcher for a low A catcher in that deal and be like, yeah, this is still close enough, right? I don't think the Angels are gonna do that. The Angels are being aggressive and trying to improve their team this year. So I think it's probably gonna be Carter Jensen that has to go. And
I
Carter
think so.
Jensen's value is closer to Blake Mitchell's than it is Ramon Ramirez right now.
Agreed.
So do you want to give up Blake Mitchell instead? I don't think so. That's my thought process there. A lot of people don't want to do that deal. I don't necessarily blame them, but also if you want if you we have this problem as baseball fans, why don't we just trade all of our bad guys for one good guy?
Yeah.
No one else wants to do that deal.
No. No one does.
So you're gonna have to give up something that hurts. We had to give up Brady Singer to get Jonathan India. Hunter Harvey I don't think a lot of Royals fans would miss him because he wasn't good when he pitched well or when he pitched healthy. I don't think he was healthy actually the entire time
Think
he
he
was
was
in Kansas
either.
City. Angel Zerpa, there's a lot of reasons. I know a lot of people would miss him. I would miss him a little, but there's also a lot of reasons to wonder, is what he did last year replicable? So then the guy you're going to really have to miss is going to hurt when you trade him is going to be a Carter Jensen kind of guy.
Right. Which, you know what? We've seen it before as Royals fans trading away prospect power for immediate help. And, I think that most Royals fans would do sending away Will Myers and those other players that they did
Which
in
is
exchange for James Shields and Wade Davis. I think they would do that again.
it's really funny because I did an evaluation of that deal a few years after that, I think 2017, 2018, and I determined that had the Royals not made that trade, they would have had more WAR on the team between um at least in 2013, maybe
Okay.
not 2014. I don't remember exactly how that all broke down, but because Will Myers had such a good rookie season and Jake Odorizzi ended up being about as good as James Shields.
Yeah, he did. He
Now,
did.
of course, you can't just drop those guys into the Royals and say, well, you're obviously going to be exactly the same player you were with the Rays. But so it's always funny to me when everyone's like, that deal worked out so great. I'm like, I mean, Yeah, but it might have been better to not do it. I don't know.
We will never know, thankfully.
Yeah.
I'll put up a poll with this podcast up on Spotify that you can respond to. Put your trade proposal in there. I want to see if our listeners would do that.
Yeah, the last argument I kind of want to make here is the window is open.
It
Right this
is.
second, the window is open. How long is this window open? You never know. When is Carter Jensen ready to contribute at the big league level? Is it this year? Is it next year? Is it 2 years from now? Is it never? We don't know. We love our prospects here in Kansas City. They're all we've had to look forward to so many
Yeah.
times is our
Yeah.
prospects. So I get it. You don't want to lose your prospect, but y'all, he might not be good.
There's always that chance. There's a reason why he's a prospect. Okay,
Yeah.
it's perspective.
And Taylor Ward, he's not perfect, but
He's
he's
not.
good.
He is good, and he would certainly be an upgrade here in Kansas City.
MLB ranked him one of the top 10 left fielders in the game right now.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see him that high, but hey, the shredder list is always right, Jeremy? It's infallible. Not really. So, hey, Jeremy, speaking of the outfield, there are some other points that I want to get to from Royals rally because this was the first time in a while it felt like we heard from all the Royals leadership, and I really wish could have been there in person for it, but a lot of great people covering it. Annie Rogers, Joel Penfield, Kevin O'Brien had a lot of great people there keeping an ear out. I do want to get your thoughts on some of the moving parts that the Royals talked about. You know, Jonathan India and Michael Massey getting opportunities in left field, Michael Garcia being a right-handed platoon with Kyle Isbell and moving Massey and India over to third. It's like there's just a lot going on there, and I don't know. It's all going to happen in spring training. They're probably not going to be moving around that much during the regular season. But man, I don't know how I feel about having three key infielders in the grand scheme of things going out to the outfield and possibly injuring themselves ahead of the regular season. Like what do you think?
So I think that I want a starting outfielder. I want one
Yeah.
outfielder that I feel really good about. And
Okay.
then you can play these games.
Okay. Fair enough.
So like, let's say they get Taylor Ward. All right. Now Jonathan India and Michael Massey, not really worried about left field. Left field's covered now. So you start looking at third base for those guys. I think India played some third base in the minors.
I think
Um,
so.
so maybe he moves over to third base. Maybe he's not great there, but that's why you've got Michael Garcia to be a late game defensive replacement. And then Michael Garcia gets to be your super utility guy. He plays third sometimes. He plays platoon center with Kyle Isbell. India can also just DH a lot, and you can play Isbell a lot at left. But then you can move guys around however you need to at that point and find playing time for them. And then MJ Melendez and Hunter Renfroe split time in right field. And I think that works. I think that if you're like, okay, let's say Massey's your starting second baseman, you leave Michael Garcia at third, and then also sometimes in center somehow, who's playing third if Michael Garcia's in center?
Right.
At that point, is Jonathan India learning left field and third base?
That's tough.
That sounds like it's hard enough to learn one of those positions.
Yeah.
Relearning both of them at the major league level, that seems like a lot to ask from a guy.
Yeah, it does.
So that would concern me if they were trying to move that many pieces around that much.
One thing that I am a little bit abnormally concerned about is the arm strength. Michael Massey and Jonathan India, neither one of them have like a real rifle, or if they do, they haven't shown it off. They're at second base because they've been second baseman their entire careers.
Mhm.
So I am worried because left field, you don't need a strong arm as much. It's still valuable, but third base, you definitely need a strong arm. Michael Garcia has shown that off plenty of times. So I do have some concern there.
Well, again, I think what you're looking at is you're hoping that a Jonathan India at third base improves your offense enough that you don't mind losing that defense. And you still have, like I'm going to keep hammering this. Michael Garcia comes into the seventh inning and plays third base and fixes your defense for the late game. I think is where you go with that. Just kind of like the Royals did with Gerard Dyson in 2013, 2014, 2015.
Right,
Put him
right.
in center and right field to improve the outfield defense every week or every night. So that's what I would do in that situation. I get it. You're gonna lose some defense, but you've got to do something to fix the offense. And frankly, whoever you put at third base is not going to be as good defensively as Michael Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't have Michael Garcia's bat at third base the way it was last year.
Very true. Very true. Another note ahead of spring training. Apparently, Kyle Wright is a little behind. The phrase is a touch behind other pitchers heading into the spring, according to manager Matt
If only
Quatraro.
someone had projected that he would
Oh,
probably
wow.
start the year on the injured list still.
Wow, Jeremy. Yeah, I would prepare myself for that. Especially, he's been off the mound for a long time. The Royals aren't going to push him back
No, it would be
sooner than he's
stupid.
ready.
It would be awful stupid. Don't do that. They won't.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do it.
They didn't rush Bubich back. They're not going to rush Wright back. It
No.
would make no sense.
So I wouldn't complain or be surprised if I see him on 60-day IL to start off the
At least
season.
the 15. It's the 15 for pitcher still. Or again. But especially because, as I mentioned, even if they trade Hunter Harvey and Angel Zerpa, two relievers, they still have a bunch of guys who can fill out that bullpen. And James MacArthur would still end up in the minor leagues. I mean, this is what my projection is that MacArthur would start in the minors and Wright would start on the injured list, and they'd still have 8 guys I feel okay about in the bullpen.
Right. Right. And I get it. James MacArthur hasn't been at the major league level a whole lot. He only has one minor league option left. So that might play into things with what the Royals want to do with him.
He and Zerpa, I think, are the only ones that do have options left. No, Zerpa ran out last year too, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Let me double check. I think you're right. Yeah, so Sam Long is out of options. This is all according to Fangraphs, I do want to say. Sam Long is out of options. Angel Zerpa does have
Schreiber
one.
has an option, but they're not going to demote him.
Schreiber has 3, amazingly.
Yeah. They're not going to demote him.
No. Same thing with Lucas Ursig. He has 3, but they're not going to use that.
So
I do want to say, if you go pull up roster resource, it's going to show Carlos Hernandez as having 0 options. I remember looking at the postseason media guide for the Kansas City Royals. Carlos Hernandez does have 1 minor league option.
My understanding is he's out of options.
It is. I'll send you the doc. I'm just going off what the team is putting out.
I think the team might have been wrong there.
You were going to say something before I cut you off.
I was just going to say, yeah. So in the world where MacArthur has options and no one else does, the team and Wright has a reason to still be on the injured list. The Major League Baseball team's pitching is something you want to keep as much inventory as possible, so you will stuff it anywhere you can. That means MacArthur's going to be in the minors. It means Wright's going to be on the injured list, because I know you don't want to see Stratton, but they're going to see, can Stratton figure some stuff out now that he's healthy again? And if he can't, well, then, okay, we kept this inventory for a reason. We cut him, we bring one of those guys on, and we move forward from there. That's how this all works. You don't cut a pitcher until you absolutely have to.
Right. No, we're not talking about Kyle Wright anymore. We are talking about the bench, which just lost a competitor in it, in Braden Shoemake. Long
competitor.
Long may his Royals reign. Annie Rogers, in her most recent, does list guys like Nick Prado and Nelson Velasquez. They are out of options. They might end up on the opening day roster just for that reason. Or it could be Dairon Blanco and Joey Weimer for those late game pinch running. I keep on saying Weimer, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Weimer.
Nick Prado,
it's just a bit.
Who was the other one you said was out of options?
Nelson Velasquez.
They're both going to be DFA'd.
Yeah, you think so?
There's no room for them. When I looked at the bench, you get 4-man bench. You got to have Freddie Fermin.
Yep.
Got to have him.
Got it.
I think Joey Weimer makes the team because he can play center field.
Yeah.
It could be that they keep Dairon Blanco if they really think Michael Garcia can play center field. I think Kevin Biggio is going to be the left-handed utility option, just based on, they called him super utility. I'll update this when we go into spring training and we see some guys play. but that's where I sit right now. And then who was the fourth person I had on the bench?
I can't remember now that I think about it.
I had Hunter Renfroe because I have the Royals acquiring Taylor Ward. If they don't acquire Taylor Ward, then I guess there's room for one more outfielder, but I think it would be Dairon Blanco
I
before
would
it
think
would be
so.
Nelson Velasquez. I will always appreciate the fall that Nelson gave us in 2023.
Man,
It doesn't look like it's there.
it doesn't.
And Nick Prado, I don't really know why he's still on the 40-man roster as we speak.
I don't either.
The Royals said Vinny Pasquantino went down with an injury. You know what we'll do? We'll trade for a 40-year-old that no one else wanted on their major league roster.
Yeah.
They didn't say let's call up Nick Prado. We don't have another option. They said let's get Yuli Gurriel in here.
And even
That tells you
between
everything you need to know about how the Royals feel about Nick Prado.
exactly. And what his only appearance this year was a pitching appearance. Like he didn't even have a plate appearance. And when Vinny went there, because there was a little bit of a gap between when Vinny hit the IL after that Astros game and when Yuli joined the organization. That stopgap between then was Nick Lofton. Okay, it is. They are. I think they are completely out on Nick Prado. I really don't know why he's on
I
the 40-man roster.
I'm gonna have to assume at this point, honestly, that he's just not even doing what they want him to do. Like he's got a bad attitude or something. Because you would think that in that scenario they'd go, well, you've been working hard, you're not it, but you've been working hard, so we'll call you up as the stopgap while we try and get somebody. You don't even call him up for that.
Nothing.
That feels like you're saying, sorry, man, you weren't even trying. We're not gonna give you anything.
We'll see what happens there.
It's all speculation. I don't have any evidence, so please don't sue me.
Yes, please don't, because our
Sue
funds
Jacob
are
instead.
very low.
All
Hey,
opinions are.
hey, 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 easy there, easy there. I really hope Drew Waters has a great spring. I really do, man.
Here's the problem with Drew Waters is they already have Kyle Isbell, and Drew Waters, he's a switch hitter, but he really only hits left-handed. So he can't platoon with Isbell, and his defense isn't good enough to supplant Isbell, and his offense isn't good enough to supplant even Renfroe and Melendez. So
It is what it is. I'm trying to look up his minor league numbers from last year. 120. Yeah, like I mean this is a guy that a lot of Royals fans should be pushing to have on the opening day roster. Just looking at his AAA numbers, but and I'm reading too much into this. When Drew was at the major league level, he did get some pinch hitting or pinch running, excuse me, opportunities. So at least maybe Q would find some value with him there. But we'll have to wait and see. All right, Jeremy, let's go and get on out of here, man. It's been a long podcast. We actually had a lot of things to talk about, huh? It's
and
pretty
I'm
crazy.
hoping to have a lot more to talk about before spring training starts.
Right. We will have to. I think that in the coming weeks we should probably detail an opening day roster again. Maybe when a position players report. How's that sound?
All right.
All right. But for the time being, we're going to get to our reviews. Jeremy, you have two for us this evening, so if
Yeah,
you
I
don't
got two
mind
for you.
dropping those.
So, like I said, no sports this week that I care
Yeah.
about. I'm a baseball, football guy. So I watched a movie yesterday, Dream Scenario, which is a comedy starring Nick Cage. Only it's a comedy in the way that nobody labels things dramas anymore. They're just like, well, it's not an action movie. It's not science fiction or fantasy. It must be a comedy. I won't say there weren't funny moments in Dream Scenario, but it wasn't a funny movie. It stars Nick Cage. He plays an old, boring college professor who just suddenly starts appearing in everyone's dreams across the world. And I went into this movie knowing it was a comedy, thinking, and watching the trailer thinking, okay, so it's going to be kind of goofy. Nick Cage is going to be kind of weird in people's dreams, and they're going to be trying to figure out why he's in everybody's dreams, and that'll be a fun little adventure to figure that out. They never really try to figure out why he's in anyone's dreams.
Mm.
We just kind of like they kind of did a thing where he went virally famous. How does he deal with the new fame? How does his family deal with the new fame? And there's also, I gotta say, there was a whole like B plot of he was an evolutionary. He had a doctorate in evolutionary biology, and he had a graduate paper he wrote on ants. And one of his fellow students stole his work and published it as a professor,
Hmm.
and like that didn't go anywhere. That never like she starts off like this is a big deal to him. He confronts her. She's like, "Oh no, I'm not stealing your work." And then a few scenes later, she absolutely stole his work, and that's the last we ever talk about that. And then what actually bugged me about the movie is that we do this whole thing where he's like trying to use his fame to start to publish his own book, and he can't really get anybody invested in that. That's fine. But then, so originally, he's just showing up in people's dreams and not doing anything. Like they're having normal dream stuff happen, and he's just not doing anything, and everyone thinks that's funny. But then, all of a sudden, he starts attacking people in their dreams. And again, he's not controlling any of this. They're not controlling it, and everybody has a very like visceral reaction to dreaming that this man is trying to kill them. Instead of being like, "Well, that's weird," they're like, won't show up to class. They're kicking him out of restaurants, and he like has to go on the alt right podcast circuit in order to make money because he gets fired for. And it's just like, what?
Oh, jeez.
Why did any of this happen? What are you trying to say? I don't understand. So I did not enjoy that movie, and I'm very annoyed. Like if it had been pitched as a drama, I think I could have at least gotten something out of it. But pitching it as a comedy made me think that like something was gonna matter, or we were gonna have a point, and we were gonna have some laughs, and we didn't have any of that.
Gotcha.
Um, so the positive review I have for you, which I'll try to keep short because that was already way too long. Maybe I should just give you the positive review next time.
Okay. Hey, you know
I mean,
what? No, keep
if
it
you
keep
don't,
keep it short. Keep
yeah,
it short
yeah,
now, Jeremy. Okay.
I do these too long. I don't want everyone to get bored with it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I trying to be considerate here. Political trigger warning question mark insert here. Listen, listened to a book called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. He's a Yale professor specializing in history in Central and Eastern Europe. And what it is, it's a little 200-page book, and it's set up as examining 20 20 factors that could enable turning established democracies into dictatorships. This isn't a new book. It came out in 2017. The audio version that I listened to is a little under 2 hours long. If you need pictures, there's a graphic novel edition. Don't you worry about that.
Graphic
I know, right?
novel edition.
Yeah. But believe it or not, I was very surprised to see that. But it was pretty straightforward, to the point. There was a lot of concepts, but also a lot of connecting dots. A lot of, hey, this is how this happened, this is why it happened, and this is how it could happen in the 21st century. I was like, well, we've seen that over the past couple of years with a few of those things. So I was a little unsettled after I read this, but it was definitely a thinker. It was pretty easy to get through, and I enjoyed the book. I really did. So it's On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. You go check it out. It's got like 4.8 stars on Goodreads, so I'm not digging in the weeds here on it. It's a good book. All right, Jeremy, anything else before we get on out of here?
Take care of yourselves, all y'all. Just take care of yourselves. It's rough out there right now.
That it is. That it is. If you need to reach out to either one of us, please feel free to do so on Blue Sky. My email is also down in the podcast description below if you want to reach out to me directly. If you want to follow along with us more on social media, do so on Blue Sky. Um, Getting less and less active on the other app. Hopefully, I know Jeremy has been saying little snide comments at the end of these episodes, but I am putting myself on the record, Jeremy. I do want the podcast completely off of Twitter by opening day. Okay,
All right,
gotta.
let's make it happen.
Yep. So we'll see what happens. If I know people have already put in the Spotify comments about Blue Sky. If you really feel that strongly about Blue Sky, you let us know down in the comments.
What are they saying? I haven't seen the comments.
I'll send them to you.
All
I'll
right.
send them to you. Don't you worry. Alrighty, y'all. I'm Jacob Milham. They're Jeremy Greco. Thank you for being with us tonight. And until next time, go Royals.